My Govanin. Welcome back to Medieval Art. I'm Dr. Brian Keane, and I'm excited to begin an ongoing conversation about Amazon Prime's Lord of the Rings of Power, Season 2, with fans of Tolkien and scholars of the Middle Ages. Today, I'm joined by Dave Lewis of Cinemillennials on Instagram and YouTube, and we're going to unpack all the things that we loved about the first 3 episodes of Season 2. Spoiler alert for those watching. Dave, let's get it started. What are the things that we really loved in these first 3 episodes? What are we watching with cautious optimism as we wait for it to unfold over the coming weeks? And then what are some things that we're excited about for the coming weeks? Where should we start?
I really enjoyed some of the new characters, and more specifically, I enjoyed Ben Daniels' portrayal as Círdan, the shipwright, one of the oldest and wisest elves. And you can definitely see the reverence, the rest of the elves, the higher elves that are in power, the higher up elves that are in power, and their reverence for him and his wisdom. I loved Charles Edwards as Celebrimbor. He really brings about this kind and sweet vulnerability to the character that most people aren't or don't associate with him, because it allows Sauron to manipulate that, and it enables us to focus on the driving theme throughout Tolkien's legendarium, and that is pity, and how that moves the world and moves the events of the world. As well as this, I am cautiously optimistic, as I've said before, about the creation process or the chronology of the rings, because of the focus on the three first being literal to the ring poem. It does undermine a lot of what Tolkien wrote himself, and kind of comes across as arrogant a little bit from the showrunners. Brian, what do you think?
I like that you started with Círdan and then gradually moved into this discussion about the ring lore and the creation of the rings, because with Círdan, I appreciated, as you said, the sense that he's so wise that he knows that Elrond carries something, but is not yet even swayed by the power of the rings. But then gradually, just upon seeing the rings, then we begin to see the power that they have. And I think when he storms into Lindon, with his great sort of majestic presence, wearing Narya presently, and then we gradually see Nenya falling to the ground and Galadriel picking Nenya up, and then Vilya eventually being placed on the finger of Gil-galad. That's a really powerful moment, and yet to get to that point, Elrond has had to take the rings to Círdan, and Elrond isn't yet swayed by the rings, but we know Elrond's role eventually as a ring bearer himself, that of Vilya. So there were some great moments as I'm watching and thinking back to the lore and thinking, wow, they're really tying a lot of knots together for me in ways that make sense. And then you're right; it's this sort of creation process of the rings. We have a story about the elves and their history, the waning light of the elves and the Eldar, and that sort of drives an entire storyline to then eventually bring about the creation of the rings for the dwarves and men. And so I'm curious where this goes. I think it'll be important to debate and discuss what is lore, what is canon, how does this all shape out. I also think you called out Celebrimbor in such a beautiful way. I love the characterization. I love that we finally have a view of Anatar, and I think it never surprised me or felt too simplistic that you'd have this wondrous being, Anatar, that could so persuade and deceive even someone as wise as Celebrimbor. So I'm glad that we finally have the character. I don't know that we needed a full Halbrand storyline to get us there. I'm glad to have seen that storyline of Sauron um, transitioning to his Halbrand state and then Anatar state and Sauron state. So it's been really fun to see. I'm also thinking that we get into the land of Rhûn. We also see additional characterization of the dwarven realm. So anything else to build upon there? These new lands, these new realms, and these storylines.
Yeah, I'm really curious as to see where they're going with Rhûn in the terms of what is going on with the actual, the people that inhabit Rhûn, rather than the acolytes and this dark wizard played by Kieran Hines. I think he was really interesting in what he was doing. I'm interested in seeing how that's developing, how the hobbits get involved, or sorry, how the Harfoots get involved, and we might possibly get the confirmation of the stranger, the Astari, being Gandalf. So
And by
those
contrast, then this dark wizard being Saruman, perhaps,
yes,
right?
absolutely. And then
Or I'd love
going
them to just both be the blue wizards, but
that's
we still have this
honestly
moment of deception.
that's the thing that I love the most, or not that I love the most, the thing that I would wish the most to have these things being new characters. They love talking about, oh, we're introducing these new characters, introducing these things like Tom Bombadil to be in this final story. I mean, not this final story, this story that, no one has talked about before. Tolkien hasn't even written about it before. They want to make these marks on it, while at the same time, they don't want to adhere to a lot of hierarchical things that are like the roots of Ithaglir being true, speaking about roots, being so rooted into what Tolkien's essence or what the essence of Tolkien is in this show. I think a lot of times is that we're missing out on things that are clearly Tolkienian here. They think it's Tolkienian when it actually isn't, in a way. I think there are a lot of positive things that we are getting, like how the rings affect Gil-galad and Galadriel, and that they're able to perceive things, the things that once were or may not yet to come. So, what are your thoughts on those kind of things?
Yeah, I think there's these really clever, seemingly clever hints at the lore, right? I mean, with Elrond leaping off the cliff of Lindon into the water and then emerging in the Grey Havens, I think about his mother Elwing, who essentially does cast herself into the Great Sea and then is given wings and flies. So is maybe that a sort of subtle nod, or the story that Isildur gives about his mother drowning to save his life, but nobody else has heard that tale back in Númenor. That's really kind of clever and I think smart nods to the lore for those who are aware. And if nothing else, it's great storytelling. The roots of Hithaglir, they enter in this other dimension to the relationship between the elves and the dwarves, but then also the Valar and the dark forces of Morgoth. It creates complexity in a world that is already incredibly complex and thought about by Tolkien himself, and then later Christopher Tolkien and the Tolkien state and so forth. So it is complicated, I know, when we're talking about lore and canon. At this point, I know, as we've said before, we're just excited to be in Middle Earth and
Yes.
to have these glimpses. We're very excited about Tom Bombadil coming up. But I think it's those moments when the showrunners have attempted to seem clever at deceiving us as the audience. And if the two Ishtari that we have turn out to be Gandalf and Saruman, great. They've hinted at it a lot. And if they end up being the Blue Wizards, awesome, even better, because there's the potential that they even pass down some of their costume and speech and general lore to Gandalf and Saruman later. So I think there's a lot to still think through. We're only in season 2 of 5 or so, right?
Yes,
So there's a
five.
long way to go. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, completely there's a long way to go. And I feel like again, it is that thing where maybe people like us are not being patient enough to finally get to see where they're going. There is, you know, uh, sorry, I'm horrible at math. I'll stick to the history and to the lore, but the math. But we have a couple episodes left. We only have 5 episodes left. So I think with those 5 episodes, again, we just have to be patient and wait and see what's going on with these things. While yes, we know all this lore, we know all the kind of the focus of canon, although albeit canon doesn't really apply to Tolkien in a lot of ways, as you were saying. It will be interesting to see where we're going with this big focus on Sauron slash Anatar's relationship with Celebrimbor and his relationships to each of the children of Iluvatar, the elves, the dwarves, and the men, and to see where we can go from there.
I think you're right, and we've already begun to see the influence of the rings on the three elven ring bearers. We've already had lots of foreshadowing of the downfall of Númenor. We've already seen the sort of potential downfall of even Celebrimbor. We know where some of these characters end up, and it will be interesting to see how we get there over the course of the next several weeks. So I'm grateful for this really quick chat. I know we're going to do a deeper dive as well for those who want to continue watching. But thank you, Dave, so much for joining me, and I look forward to our continuing conversation in the weeks to come. And Namarie.
Namarie.